All right. Hello, 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 and welcome to Intercultural Spark, the show about that spark inside of you that drives you to want to spark change in the business, in your business, and in the world. Today, our guest is Raúl Colón. He is an entrepreneur who allows himself through his entrepreneurship to support social and environmental causes. And he funds a lot of his activism through his photography. And of course, today is Veterans Day. And we also celebrate Raul, who served 2 years in active military and another 7 years in the reserves, and found that some of what he learned, or a lot of what he learned in logistics and supply and things like that, helped him when there was need for different issues in Puerto Rico. So, welcome to Intercultural Spark. Hi, Raul. How are you?
Diana, kind of cool to see some familiar faces in that intro. How are
Oh,
you doing,
right.
Diana?
I'm doing fantastic. So, of course, I'm here in Chicago, and you're based in Puerto Rico. We're like on borderline getting to winter here, but I imagine it's probably nice and beautiful where you are.
It's pretty warm here still. It's like in the 80s and 90s. I mean high 80, hey, high 80s and low 90s. So yeah, big difference in weather.
For sure. So I wanted to talk to you. You talk about activism through entrepreneurship. And the more I talk to you, the amount of difference that you're making in the world is phenomenal. And what's interesting, though, is a marketer, marketers like perception sometimes is even more important than what happens. We want to tell everyone everything. And I find with you that a lot of it is more about the work that you're doing and the people that you're helping. Just wondering if you can share a story or a moment when you realized with your activism that you were doing exactly what you should be doing in life.
I think, I've been an activist for quite some time. As soon as I left the military, where I had the freedom of actually, expressing my opinion that didn't go in line with what I had committed to, right? In that case, it took me quite some time because, I think things are changing right now, and people are going more towards, social activism and understanding a bit more why people like me have been out there for quite some time because it felt a bit lonely sometimes when you would go to an environmental protest and you see the same familiar faces, right? And it's kind of like family. But I think in the last 3 or 4 years, I've seen a big difference, at least here on the island, of the kind of people that are actually saying, "Hey, wait, they're not just." Protesting about something that doesn't matter to me. I just didn't realize the connection, right? So I think I would say last year when the last year, I have a friend that has a show on CNN. His name is W. Kamau Bell, and it's United States of America. And
Mhm.
all of us last year when the protest started, I all of a sudden I'm not using Twitter as much as I used to maybe
Mhm.
8 years ago, and I see that I had a lot of notifications on Twitter, and I didn't know what was going on. So finally, when I logged in, it was that W. Kamau Bell was saying that I was a
Mhm.
source to follow with what was going on when we had the protest that took the governor made him
Oh,
resign out of power, right?
interesting.
So
Mhm.
I mean, this is like then all of a sudden, like Rosario Dawson follows me on Twitter, asks me how she can help, and all these people are like trying to connect with me. I also collaborate with a journalist out of CBS, and he's sending me a message asking me if they can use their pictures because their teams were coming in the cover, but they weren't here yet, And that's when I realized, like, wow, I normally think that my pictures are helping, just get people there to like just
Mhm.
show that it's not just a few of us. It's
Mhm.
and maybe with my photography and what I do, I'm always trying to put the spotlight on different types of people that go out and worry about the environment, about climate, about just regular social causes. But at that moment, and just so you know, that was probably July 14th, 2019, around there.
Mhm.
And in a matter of days, I remember the first day I was like really happy. I was like, wow, there's like 100 people here. The first day I went, because they had been protesting for a few days before. I was like, oh, there's a lot. This is
Mhm.
pretty cool.
And of
There's a
course,
lot of
this
people.
was the corruption issue with the governor at that time, who then, because of the protests, did not run for reelection. So,
Well, he had
correct.
to
That was
resign. So he had
he
to
had to
resign.
resign.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
we
Wow.
spent 3 weeks on the streets because he was just similar to the situation right now. He didn't really. We found so much on him, and well, that was exposed, and there was evidence that of the wrongdoing he was doing outside of the corruption. That people were really mad, and it scaled up so quickly from 100 people to like the next day 2,000 people to the next day 10,000 people, and in like 4 or 5 days we had almost 1 million people walking in the streets asking for his resignation. And we have a
Wow.
population of 3.5 million, maybe a little bit less after Hurricane Maria and all the situations
Mhm.
we've had recently. But just to have 1 million people from all walks of life, all beliefs, all political sides unite, and it was like I remember like the day that there were about 1 million people walking. Well, I know that was like 400,000. I came back and I didn't even take any pictures because I was so amazed of seeing
Mhm.
all people
Oh,
from
just
walks
in
of
awe of
life.
all the people.
Yeah, I
But
was
it
like, because
sounds like with the pictures you were taking, though, because I know CBS News used your photos. So, because you're an amazing photographer, I am just going to go ahead and, oh, I told you I do that once a show where I want to focus on you and then I just make myself really big. And now I can't, sorry, I'm
that's fine.
let me share the screen. That is funny. What I wanted to show, not that, what I wanted to show was this, which is your amazing photography. Because it sounds like photography is your passion. You were taking pictures of what was happening, posting it on your own streams, and then news sources were finding your photography to use. That's really powerful.
Yes, I think little by little, the same way I do a lot of things behind the scenes. I've been like, if there's a there's a news lead for any journalist I know, I'll reach out to them. I'll send them the information. I'll send them a little bit of evidence with photos and stuff like that, and building those relationships were have been very critical, because at that moment, normally it's me sending something to them. Can you cover this because it's important to us? Versus them saying, hey,
Mhm.
what do you have? Because we want to cover it. That's when you realize that you've taken the right path, right? And you made some interesting
Oh,
changes in your life.
sure.
Hmm.
That's wonderful. Now, so question for you. So that's where sort of your activism and then being an entrepreneur. But what does that mean in terms of working with others? Is it about running a business to allow you to have a lifestyle to be an activist, or is it helping people align their business goals with their social justice things that they want to do?
I think it's a little bit of all of that, but I see it
Mhm.
in a way like I've structured my life to do good around my communities, do good around family, right? Because we have people who are like, activists all their lives and they don't have time to spend with their families and stuff like that, right? And it goes by
Sure.
levels, right? When you're in the military, you start from like unit to squad to platoon,
Mhm.
and it keeps on, it keeps on increasing, right? And you have to take care of those around you first before you can take care of everybody, right? So in that sense, I've built my business in a way where I have clients who understand what I do. They respect what I do. Some of them might not even think the same way I do, but the fact that
Mhm.
they know that I'm being genuine and I'm never going to put their interest, at risk. If it wasn't, unless there's like something they're doing business with somebody that's hurting, the communities and stuff like that, which
Mhm.
I normally at that point would say, look, I can't work with you because there's a conflict of interest, right? So
Oh,
I set
interesting. Sure.
I've set up my business for two main things, to spend more time with my daughter. She's just going to turn 10 now. I used to
Mhm.
be an IT security consultant, being on planes and traveling a lot before she was born. And
Mhm.
then I lost my job, a little bit before she was born. And I also lost a bunch of clients. So I was forced to stay home, not because I wanted. And I enjoyed it so much that I said, let me make sure
Uh,
I can be around her, and we
mhm.
homeschool her. And then second is just like being able, like right now, if something's happening, it's important to the causes I want to support, dropping everything and going to find how to connect the dots, right? Because my main objective is to support those causes, and for those causes to reach their objective is not for people to know what I'm doing, and that's a big difference. I've been an activist for quite some time, and I see it in all walks of life, right? There's a lot of people that want the attention and they want the merit credit, and that's fine. There's plenty of that. In my case, I want to be behind the scenes, and I just want to make sure that things get done. And like for example with the earthquakes, if somebody doesn't have a cot where to sleep at, or a tent, I can figure out a way to just get them to sleep a little
Mhm.
bit better at night.
Mhm. One thing I thought was interesting when you look at the activism and what you do, I was looking at particularly on the page of Puerto Rico, and almost every section, whether it was, what do you want to donate? What do you want to do? Almost every section said, ask what people need first. It seemed like that was really a core mantra. How do you find that that helps? I mean, it seems obvious to ask, but so many people dive in and just want to help. How do you help with that, or how do you manage that?
I think I there's two big situations where I saw where people were just like they
Mm,
wanted to help and they were hurting more than they were helping, right? One
mm,
was Hurricane Maria, where from like so Diana, I come for 10 years. I was an IT security consultant. I was preparing large businesses for disasters, and all the
mhm.
time they were like, "We don't need that. That's like you're exaggerating. That's never gonna happen. Whatever." I
Sure.
knew here in Puerto Rico at one point the ATMs were not gonna have cash. I knew that was gonna happen. Everything that happened during Maria, I had prepared for, and I had probably spoken
Mhm,
to other family members and like, "This guy is nuts. There's no way this is an apocalyptic situation," and it wasn't, right? So in that case, I remember we were so lucky that thanks to friends like Chris and a bunch of other
mhm,
people, they set up a GoFundMe and I was able to leave the island so I could operate my business because there was no way to communicate, right? And
mm,
I
mhm.
run a digital
Sure.
marketing agency where I need to like update websites and stuff like that.
Mhm,
At that point, I left, and my biggest struggle was seeing people trying to send like items when nothing was being actually shipped.
sure.
Nothing could be shipped, nothing could be delivered, right? I had like I came back 38 days later, and I had boxes and boxes in my apartment because I had left the key to somebody else, and I could like I didn't even know who they were from because people just wanted to send stuff, right? And some of
Mhm,
that stuff was
sure.
helpful because I was able to use it for other situations, but when I reached Connecticut, I remember I got invited to like a kind of like a town hall with the Puerto Rican community over there. My biggest frustration was I was the only person that had lived through at least 2 weeks of the aftermath of the hurricane.
Mhm,
I knew how to like get stuff because when I was in Honduras and El Salvador, we did a lot of humanitarian relief.
mhm,
I knew what needed to be done, and everybody's just thinking about stuff that has nothing to do with what we needed here. And like one of the things I did, I rented a car even before I left the hurricane, and I
mhm,
started going like it was really old school. There was no communications, right? It's not like there wasn't any radio. You know what's going on. You literally have to like explore and see. And we couldn't
mhm,
communicate with family members for like a whole week or a little bit more. And I had friends who one of the local hotels gave me access to the internet, and they were sending me, "Can you go and knock on mom's door and check if she's okay?" So
oh, to see if she's okay.
we
Sure.
literally went house by house, old school, like we used to do when we were kids, knocking on
Mhm,
people's door,
yeah.
making notes, making recording messages that were going to be forwarded. So I had seen the island before I left, and it was like all they wanted to do was send stuff, not
Mhm,
figuring out how you get this from point A to point B, right? There were some groups in New York who did a really good job, and they didn't even want to listen to them, and those people got the help that where people needed. When I see this again, it's when the earthquakes happen. What you
mhm,
need for an earthquake is different than what you need for after a hurricane, right? And the biggest issue is an earthquake continues. When the hurricane passes, you're fine, right? But when your earthquake continues, so you're going into
mm,
areas that you're putting yourself at risk. And I was seeing people like here, how take this. I'm like, nobody needs this, and I
mm,
only have so much space in each trip to take stuff. So this is what we need, and
sure.
it was very frustrating because people wanted to help, but they just wanted to do
Mhm,
just a little bit, and that
mhm,
little bit might give you more work to and steer you away from what you
mhm.
needed, right? So main
Mhm.
thing we needed
Well,
was
it's also
how.
interesting to see like how much individuals need. Because I think my son and I went on a relief trip with through the Jewish Federation in Chicago. And this was easily 2 years after the hurricane. There were a good dozen of us, and we spent the 4 or 5 days we were there working on one roof on one house. Like that many years later, this house was still just completely ruined by the hurricane, and so you start to realize you're right. People want to have this big impact, but at the end of the day, it was a lot of individuals who needed help. And actually, real quick, speaking of individuals, if you're watching live, please say hello to us in the comments so we know who's here. And we also invite you to ask any questions that you have. So any questions in the comments, we'll be able to share. So, well, you talked about just tying back now to the work that you do in Puerto Rico and also Veterans Day. You talked about doing humanitarian missions to both El Salvador and Honduras. Now, was that when you were in the military? Was that part of your service? And what did you learn that helps you now?
The fact that I was bilingual,
Hmm.
had me going into areas that normally my job wouldn't have gone to. Because my job initially when I went to the military was fuel supply. All I had to do was put fuel in airplanes or any kind of vehicle, right?
Okay.
But at one point they didn't have enough people that were bilingual to be able to communicate with everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
I love to talk. I'm pretty decent communicator. They would send me into the areas to just figure out how what people needed and stuff
Hmm.
like that. Or well, let me just correct this. They would send me to an area to explain to people what the army was doing or whatever the local government had agreed with the U.S. to be done. So from like setting up water facility, water wells to medical facilities. Uh, it was weird because it was a humanitarian mission, but in reality, it was kind of supporting some of the allies of the U.S. over there, and some of them, once the U.S. left, there was no real good intention of keeping that water to the people, no real good intention to keeping the medical facilities free for those people. So that's when I started becoming not as I realizing that I wasn't helping as much as I thought of when I signed up, and I decided that as soon as my contract ended, I was gonna take a different route.
Wait, say that again. So it was, and actually, I just wanted to acknowledge that our Justina was talking about sometimes you can have the smallest role, but the smallest production, but still have the biggest impact. And it sounds like your role as a liaison, though, would maybe help those people with smaller roles have a big impact. Talk for a
I,
minute ago. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think that's so true, and that's a good explanation because sometimes we focus on getting like somebody doing something, but then there's
Mhm,
somebody that already knows how to do that better than you, and they know three other people they can support. So by being the liaison, I make sure that there's efficiencies in whatever needs to be done. So yeah, it does have a bigger impact because I have other people that are working towards the same goal at the same time, and I think that's where a lot of people get lost. Even in business, I see it. When I'm doing consulting, everybody wants to do their own thing, and maybe
mhm,
they just need to synchronize what they want, and if they did, they would get a lot further. So yeah, I agree.
mhm. So I wanted to go back a minute to talk about, you were talking about in the military, our friend, we've mentioned Chris a couple times. So Chris Brogan is I don't know if you want to call him like a media guru, social media guru. He has his own show, the Backpack Show, which is actually where I first connected with you. He said something on his Twitter, which was, he was talking about, he knows plenty of veterans who were of service to our countries and the countries they visited to defend or to be with. So you were brought in as a translator, but talk about that a little bit more, because you talked about you were a translator to help provide service to the countries where you were, but then there was a little bit of disconnect you felt in terms of what the mission was and what you felt could be done in country. Where
I think right, everything looks so simple. It's like let's just build a well and people have water, right? But they not
Mhm,
understanding how the politics and social classes work in that area.
mhm,
And at the end of the day, they just want to build. The U.S. just wants to build a well, then keep their allies happy, right? It doesn't. They don't get into the into the detail unless it's of their interest, right? And that's just my personal opinion. But
mhm,
then when you would see that you're like there and the people are really excited because something's being done, and
mhm,
then it can be easily taken away because as soon as the U.S. and the U.S. engineers and stuff like that left, then it's at hands of whoever's running that, and usually whoever would align with the U.S. was more interested in them getting an economical benefit, not really worried with the people, right? So being in the situation where I'm
mhm,
the translator in between diplomats, military personnel, the people that are on the ground doing the work, the community leaders, I would hear everybody out. And being that I'm Puerto Rican and I have ties to Latin America more than to US, I was kind of like in the middle, right? And
mhm,
at some points, same as when you have a tourist that goes somewhere else and they just want to like kind of bring their own rules. I saw a lot of that, a lot of people imposing what was life in the US to people who were living very
mhm,
differently, right? People who are living, if you live in New York City in a condominium, it's very different than when you live in El Salvador in one of these villages that they don't even have floor, like they live on a dirt floor, right?
mhm,
So I mean, just basic things that didn't make sense, but at the end of the day, they were just there. And similar things to we used to have to when we were in Salvador, since it was a humanitarian mission, we didn't carry weapons, which was great because I didn't want to carry one. And I would take care of the people that left with me. They would get fed and stuff like that because some of these soldiers would make maybe $200 a month. So like I would buy them lunch and stuff, and I would never have an issue
mhm,
with getting anywhere. But then some other people are like, well, they should be able to pay for their lunch, and lunch might have been $1.50 for three guys, and
mhm,
and and
sure.
and and maybe 20 and 50 cents for me. So it's like $2 for it, so everybody could have lunch. And then there was big disconnections in what the mission really was and what the overall objective I think people thought it was. And then at the end, the aftermath after that mission was completed, right? I don't. really don't believe most of those people have water after that, unless
Mm,
they have to pay for it or go through a gatekeeper, right? And again, I'm not blaming the U.S. completely.
mm,
I'm just saying that when you do, and those things kind of motivate me to do this thing. Like, if
sure.
I'm gonna focus on a community, I want to make sure to do the
Mm,
follow up, right? Because if you
mm,
help them and then you disappear, like, yeah, you helped
right.
them. That was good. It's better than not doing anything. But the
Mm.
follow up is so much more important, right?
Well, the other thing I found, this again goes back to the mission trip that my son and I were on, is that there was a group that was on the ground, and the whole issue is there still was not clean running water in this one very small rural community in Puerto Rico. Now, 2 years later, and they knew, though, it was understanding how the community works, and so it had to be a water purification that didn't run on electricity, because electricity was still not certain. So they were able to create something. There was a water source that was higher than where the community was, so that they could actually use water power to get through, to power a turbine. But that idea of, realizing that you've got to adapt what you're doing that's a good one for adapting what you're doing to what a community needs or what a community can sustain. That seems really critical. So,
And it's also harder, right? Because sometimes what you
mhm.
think will
Yeah.
benefit somebody might not be what the normal or customs are in that area, right? So it's that part of
Mhm.
educating and winning their trust that's critical, right?
Mhm.
One of the things that I had to like keep on reminding people during the earthquakes, and this was recently in January, was like, don't pop up in a situation with your camera rolling and doing a live video, because these people are going through like situations that they never imagined,
Mhm.
right? These people were getting ready for, here we celebrate Epiphany. They were getting for ready for Epiphany celebrations, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden they lost their house. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's like you don't want somebody going rolling into your house and taking video of like the worst situation of your life, and I think one of the biggest compliments I got was 3 weeks in, somebody said, "Hey, you've been here almost every day, and if you haven't been here every day, you sent somebody to just send what we need,
Mhm.
and you haven't taken a photo of us or taken a video of us, right?" And of course, I would
Wait,
document it.
and you're a photographer,
I would
right?
yeah, it's finding that balance where you document what's happening, but also you
Mhm.
also respect people's privacy. Because at the end of the day, it's not about my photography; it's about helping them, and it's
Mhm.
not about me, So it's finding that balance, and then after that, like they were asking me to take pictures of the after and what was happening. It was because they wanted, right? But it's all, again, it's more about listening. It's more about seeing
Mhm.
what exactly is going to really benefit them, right? Because if you arrive there and you're trying to bring, like, let's say food or whatever, or even a tent,
Mhm.
and you're like showing people that you gave them a tent, then they don't have a choice. They're going to take it, but you're not going to
But
really
it
win
just may
people's
not
trust that
even
way.
be what they
Mhm,
need. Yeah. And it
mhm.
sounds like on the ground. So again, reminder, if anyone's watching live, we would love for you to say hello, or for everyone who is watching live or after the fact, say hello, and please feel free to put your questions in the comments, because we'd love to hear those. But being on the ground, your role as a liaison, in a lot of cases, it feels like being a liaison and connecting people was one of the most critical things that you did. How did you use your network? So you were in New York, you've been in the military, you've been in IT, you're on the ground, in Puerto Rico. How were you able to access your network then to be able to bring resources back to the critical need in the present?
I think it's more of the ongoing of how I am, right? I'm the type of
Mhm.
person that I still remember birthdays from people who went to high school with me, or even grammar school. Like,
Mhm.
I'm always touching base with people. So the
Mhm.
moment that I don't touch base, they're like, "What happened to Raul?" Right? Or the moment that I post something, they're like, "Well, Raul's always there, so let's go help him," right? And I think that's where it becomes very easy for me at that point. Of course, for me, it's natural for me to touch base and say, "Hey, Diana, how are you doing? How's
Mhm.
everything?" Right? That's just who I am
Mhm.
as soon as somebody pops into my head. But I think nurturing those connections is the critical part, right? Because in a world where we want to connect with so many people, or we have the ability to connect with so many people, it's
Mhm.
very hard just to keep up with 100 people. Imagine
Mhm.
tens of
But it's
thousands of
hard to make
people.
it meaningful too. Like, you can connect, you can follow. I always find it hard uh, to make it a meaningful relationship, so that when you're in crisis, you actually know people that you can connect with. So how do you do that?
I think the fact that I never make it about myself helps out a lot,
Hmm.
because I'm
Sure.
telling different stories. So it
Hmm.
doesn't fatigue the person, right? I don't make it about Raul going to help. I make it about how this organization help them, even if I was involved in some way or the other, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's also not fatiguing the audience that's willing to help. And right now, after the pandemic and after all these situations that we've had, there is a lot of donor fatigue. There is a lot of fatigue of people wanting to
Mm-hmm.
collaborate on things, right? Because there's so many things we want to make better. But I think it's those two things: nurturing those networks, making it
Mm-hmm.
meaningful. They know that if Raul says hi, it's not Raul saying hi and asking for something after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just said hi because I thought about you,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's my experience is that every once in a while, somebody will pop up who I don't even sometimes know who they are, and they're asking for something, and it's like you know how long it's taking me to like land some of my clients. I have friends I've been friends with 8 or 9 years, and then finally they'll give me a project, and my intention was being friends. So for
Mm-hmm.
somebody to just immediately ask for something up front, especially when it's benefiting them, not benefiting more people, I think that's where a lot of people, even if they're trying to do well, fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it all the time. Like, as simple as I wanted to help my brother with my mom's funeral expenses lately, and in a matter
Mm-hmm.
of hours, people had helped us, help my family, and it's because I'm always there for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just posted it up. I didn't even have to go directly to somebody, and all of a sudden, and thank you also for helping. But
Oh.
so it's more about,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, nurturing those relationships, letting people, checking up on people, because if you worry about other people, and again, I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm the type of person, I try to figure out how to help before you ask me for help. So
Mm-hmm.
so I think that also comes back to me. Sometimes when people figure out like, it seems like Raul's struggling, how can we help him? And they'll reach out. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think there's a perfect formula for it. It's a lot of effort, but it has to do also with my
Mm-hmm.
personality and how I am. I'm always
Sure.
trying to like touch base with everybody and see how everybody's doing, especially if they
Mm-hmm.
mean something to me. Because on the other side, if I don't like you, you're not gonna hear from me. For me, you don't exist. So I also
Sure.
try to focus my energy on the
Mm-hmm.
people that are meaningful to me, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
sometimes waste a lot of time trying to keep relationships, because there's, in Spanish, there's different ways of saying it, but it's like, don't burn bridges. I have
Mm-hmm.
a friend
Sure.
whose name is David Baeza, and he's an entrepreneur. He's very successful in what he does. And I remember we were in Fargo, North Dakota at an event, and he did a whole thing on burning bridges fast, and burning them down quickly. And what he was saying is, there's toxic relationships that are not worth it. Why are you going to keep
Mm-hmm.
on investing
Sure.
time? So I was like, I identify with that, because I don't mean any harm to anybody that doesn't connect with me. I just don't focus on them, and I focus on the people
Mm-hmm.
that I'm still to meet, like you and like Chris and
Mm-hmm.
Bernie, who was the person that made me log in that day when you saw me on the backpack show. So
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting, we just have a few minutes left. So anyone who's live, get your questions in now, or of course, feel free to put them in afterwards. But the other thing I notice with you when you talk about like it's that sincerity, it's that 100% integrity and sincerity that goes through you, which I also find interesting though, because you've talked about your daughter being a proud dad, and you had the comic strip. What was it, Papa Heroes? You are vegan, and then you've got the website Veg Latino, which I think I told you, my whole family, my mom died and was resuscitated in 1987. She came back saying that all life is precious. And so my whole family, just about their animal rights activists, vegetarians or vegans.
so
Yeah. So, but this is about you. And what I meant with that was the websites that you do, like that you have, that you actually take what you do and then really go all out.
in what sense?
In what sense? In the sense of you're a father and now you've got the website and the comic strip Papa Heroes, or you're a vegan and now you've got the website Veg Latino, so that it is about what you learn in your life, but then how you make it available as platforms for others who might have those same interests. Do you feel it that
I
way or?
I think that helped me figure out where I am right now, right? Because Papa
Mhm,
Heroes was, for example, Papa Heroes was an effort that I did with the illustrator, Rick Lipset.
mhm,
And this is when I had just become a dad. So I was looking for information I couldn't find. And then being an IT security consultant, one of the main issues people have is like, how am I going to keep my kids safe from the internet, right? What was interesting was that most people didn't care about, keeping their kids safe and stuff. They wanted to hear more about just regular stories as a parent, and then
mhm,
Rick would capture it and do a great job doing like a weekly comic strip. We did this for like 4 or 5 years, and there's so much content there that I've kept it up, right? But I think doing that, I would. This is when my business was not doing so well. I would
Mm,
test with my projects stuff that my clients would be
mm,
like, no
mhm,
way, that's not gonna work. And then
mhm,
show them. I said, oh, my traffic on my website hasn't gone up. I said, okay, I did this in Veg Latino and I got 10,000 readers in a week. Like, would you like 10,000 readers? Yeah. So let me do my job, right?
mhm,
So it was an easy way to like show people what I could do and test things,
mhm.
because
Sure.
if something happened in those projects, it's fine. Nothing was gonna happen. Nobody's gonna fire me because it's time I put in, right? And sometimes I did mess up a few things, and it was fine. But I never wanted to test on another. If it's not mine, I don't like to experiment, right? And
Mm,
of course, there's experimentation that's calculated, right? And I will do
mhm.
that with clients. But
Oh, especially
when
with
I
new media. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And when I left the IT security world, I had always been building websites as a hobby and stuff like that, and I used to do journaling before it was called
Mhm,
blogging and stuff like that. But when I left, I was new. It was like people would respect me as an IT security consultant, but not as a web developer or web consultant. So that was a lot of stuff, that a lot of experimentation that allowed me to put stuff up. And it's kind of cool because even if I don't like what I see there now because it doesn't look very to where I need it to be, it reminds me of stuff that I probably would have forgotten that I'd done before.
mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was fun to see Justina. Justina, thank you for being here today. And for those who turned in live, if you want to find out more about Raul right here, thank you so much. I really appreciate your joining us. It sounds like you said you were helping your daughter, you're homeschooling a lesson on Veterans Day, and we appreciate your service. But it sounds like the service that you did with the military was one thing, but your reach and your imprint across all of the activism and work that you do is really phenomenal. So thank you so much, Raul, for joining today. And what do you think do you think there's like a core spark? It sounds like you said it, which was helping others and being of service, being of thought. Is there anything that you think of when you think of that spark that drives what you do in the world?
I think that I never want to be in a situation where whatever resources I have, contacts, money, you name it,
Mm,
is going to keep somebody from achieving something easily, right? And I think that's the main spark, right? When something like the earthquakes happened, which is the most recent situation where I had to
mm,
like push through, I wanted to help. I would like if it was raining, I would worry about the people that still didn't have tents, and it's like
mm,
because it was easy for me to just continue getting people to just donate and stuff like that. Same thing with the pandemic. How could I help in the pandemic? Where
mm,
I had people who I knew that needed PPE. I started searching on Twitter and putting stuff out, and all of a sudden, I had an organization that donates PPE. Delivering PPE, and our friend Carrie O'Shea
mhm,
shared how much PPE was donated. I didn't even know what they did. I just knew that everybody got PPE. I didn't even know what amount, whatever. I just wanted to make sure they connected.
I
And
got it.
and and even during the pandemic at the beginning, I was seeing a lot of people, especially in the U.S. I have friends in Maine, stuff like that, worrying when it was the first 2 weeks, and I was like, "You guys have internet, you have water, there's food, there's your basic things are being met. It's just that you're gonna have to navigate this in a different way." And I wanted to put myself out to some of these entrepreneurs because even if for me it was nothing compared to
Mm, mhm,
to what we've lived in the last 3 or 4 years. I know that if I wouldn't have gone through that, I might have felt that way too. And it's also putting yourself in their position and saying, look, I've gone through, things that are worse or similar. How can I help? Instead of like saying, well, I had
mm,
it worse. So I think always finding a way where I can, which I've learned to make sure my business continue running and stuff like that and have
mhm,
everything in check and then have that extra time to be able to help out. Because it's like when you get on a plane, if you don't put your oxygen mask first, you're not going to be able to help anybody else, right?
mhm.
So I sometimes I do have to say no, but when I say no, it's just in the back burner, seeing how either I can connect them with somebody or I can help them as soon as I free up. So
That is wonderful. And I love just that core of starting with how can I help? I'm going to end our broadcast. Stay here with me for a minute, but thank you, Raul Colón. And you've got the the website for people to get in touch with you. Really appreciate your spending this time with us today. So thank
everything.
you.